Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. And in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at my transfer plans going into Game Week 36 and, of course, for the rest of the FPL season. Right then, so let's start off by having a look at my team performance from Game Week 35 and which players are most likely to be good transfers out between now and the end of the season. 51 points for me. It was a very, very small green arrow, definitely not big enough at this point in the season. I needed a bit of a needle mover, so I took a gamble, played a -4 to bring in Mbermo and Bowen. Both of them returned, but not the huge explosive returns that you might require from a hit to give myself a big green arrow. So I'm kind of treading water a little bit at around 300k. If I'm going to make any sort of progress towards 100k, I need to take some very big swings now to even give myself a hope of getting there. And it looks fairly unlikely. So I think my transfers now need to be maybe prioritized for the forward lines, so midfield and up front, where there's a higher likelihood of a big explosive return that I could catch, and maybe on prioritizing transfers towards people that I'm happy to captain between now and the end of the season. In my backline, the double Arsenal clean sheet wipeout was very frustrating, and considering they've got Liverpool in game week 36, it was a thought to maybe get rid of one of them. However, because I've got depth on my bench and Milenkovic plays Leicester at home this week, I can bench Saliba, and then I've got a decision to make as to whether to start Raya against Liverpool or Verbruggen against Wolves. I think both concede, but I, again, don't think it's worth the upside of a transfer when I've only got 3 free transfers now between now and the end of the season. I think I need to prioritize them in positions where there's possibly higher impact or higher benefit in terms of points total to my team. No question at all that a transfer would benefit me in points in getting rid of an Arsenal defender or goalkeeper, but is that margin going to be big enough to make a difference? I would argue probably not. The same can probably be said for Munoz at this point in time. He's been frustrating, as have Palace, but even though the fixtures aren't looking too great, he's always got the chance of an attacking return. And if I get rid of him for a transfer, I'm banking on that player that I brought in to not only get the clean sheet, but also maybe even get an attacking return to outweigh Munoz over the next few game weeks. So I think for me, the defensive line probably stays as is. Moving into the midfield, I brought in Mbermo and Bowen for a -4. I was hoping that one of them would get quite an explosive return. Neither happened, but they did at least get a return each. So it wasn't a nightmare. And I think the hit did pay off considering I got rid of Saka and Asensio, and I would have played Murphy instead of Asensio. So I think that's an okay transfer. It's paid off immediately, and I prefer them both for the next couple of game weeks. Saka is maybe a point of contention, though, because he got good minutes in game week 35, looked good again, and depending how the semi-final of the Champions League goes, he could be a player that I'm interested in buying by the time we get to game week 38, for example, when they've got Southampton. So maybe one for the future, definitely not one for now, though. Salah and Sarr have been frustrating. Sarr in particular has been very, very frustrating. Points dodging to the absolute maximum degree, was fantastic against Nottingham Forest and just didn't get the return. Obviously, that's been the story for him fairly consistently over the last few game weeks, and then went to the FA Cup semi-final and bagged 3 returns in a game that didn't matter for FPL. So quite frustrating there, but I don't think he's a million miles away from a return. Salah as well, although a bit frustrating recently, hasn't really been reflecting his price point and giving value for money. It is still Salah. The data's still good. And I've got a gut feeling that maybe the Chelsea game was a little bit of an off day for Liverpool. They've obviously been celebrating all week by that point. They did rotate their lineup, and Chelsea were in good nick as well. They look very good, and they're charging towards a Champions League spot. They've got a lot to play for. So I do just wonder if that was a bit of a blip, and that Liverpool might come roaring back against Arsenal, and therefore Salah might not be an immediate sell for me. Although more on that in just a moment's time when we look at my transfer plans. Up front, I've got Mateta, Marmoush and Isak. I think all 3 of them disappointed in game week 35. Although Isak got his penalty goal and, of course, the bonus points to go with it, he didn't really do much in terms of open play. Now, I captained him because I thought it was a good matchup. I thought the Brighton fixture would be quite beneficial for Newcastle attackers, but it didn't really turn out that way. And although Isak got the return, it was a bit of an off day for him. Not many penalty box touches, got a little bit fortunate with the penalty, although arguably could have gotten 1 or 2 other penalties as well. I think the correct decision was made on those. But that is another factor as to why you have him in your side, because he gets good minutes and he has penalties. So even on an off day, he can still return. So I think Isak would be a reluctant sell if I was to do so, but there are different combinations in which I'd be willing to get rid of him between now and the end of the season, because there's upside elsewhere potentially, and you can chase the fixtures. Marmoush and Mateta. Marmoush I'll come on to in the transfer plan section, but Mateta in particular has been very frustrating. I think a little bit different to Sarr, who's still looked very good. Whilst Mateta in patches has had moments of pure brilliance in the FA Cup semi-final, for instance, and that goal against Brighton, I think it's fair to say since the injury, he hasn't really looked consistently at his best. The XG has massively dropped off, and he's getting hooked fairly early in the match as well. So he's getting a lot of early substitutes. The data's not great, and he's just not looking like in great form right now. He's also lost penalties to Eze. So I think overall that makes him a player that I'd be willing to get rid of, even though the fixture in game week 36 is looking pretty decent against Spurs. I think if I can hold on to one of Sarr or Mateta, that's probably okay. And Sarr for me right now is the player that's looking more likely to get the big returns, even if he is a bit frustrating right now. So overall, that's my game week 35 performance. Let's take a look at my transfer plans and how I'm setting up in game week 36. Right then, so I thought I'd showcase my transfer plans by looking at the actual live FPL website, so I can plug in those transfers and show you in real time what that would do to my team structure, because there's a few different combinations I do like the look of. And I think it's very important to note that any transfer plans at this point are going to be speculative, because a lot rides on that Man City fixture against Southampton and whether or not we get early team news, because of course they are one of the first games to kick off. You can see here 3 o'clock kickoff, so it's a 1:30 deadline, and they are in that batch of early fixtures. So with that in mind, because we've had early team news fairly consistently this season with Man City, and because some of the players that I'd look at bringing in potentially could be in that starting lineup, especially if I'm looking at taking a gamble on captaincy, then I'm going to want to leave it late. But that means that I need to have plans in place for whether or not I get specific pieces of early team news, and also one for if I don't get any early team news. So starting off with that, it's fairly simple. If we get absolutely no team news on Kevin De Bruyne or Haaland or Marmoush, then for me, it is fairly simple, and it's a move that a lot of people are looking at making this week, and that would be to bring in a striker to replace Mateta. Now, Mateta's not been in great form. We've spoken about it. The fixtures aren't great, but they're also not terrible. Spurs away in 36 isn't a fixture that I necessarily desperately want to sell Palace players for. But when you look at the upside of some of the other fixtures, some very good strikers have, and when you combine that with things like the minutes and the data for Mateta, I think it's a transfer I can get on board with. So the last 3 game weeks, he's played 74, 10, and 75. And in each of those game weeks, he's not had more than 0.06 XG in that game. In fact, you have to cast your mind all the way back to game week 25, when he had an XG of over 0.5. So it's been a bit of a barren spell for him. It's not all his fault. Obviously, he got injured, and they have been rotating for the FA Cup knockout rounds. Obviously, that's paid dividends. But I can see a world in which he gets 70 minutes again, and arguably there are a few other strikers that I prefer at that point. Now, I think the most popular one for a lot of people will be Yoane Wissa, and that it goes without saying that that is a good transfer in, right? He's been getting fantastic minutes. I think it's 90 minutes all the way back to game week 19 now. So he is about as locked into that Brentford side as you could possibly imagine. Brentford have got attackers coming back from long-term injuries, but I'd be surprised if that would be at the expense of Wissa's minutes, considering they are gunning for European football. He is in sensational form right now. And just looking at the underlying data as well, 1.2 against Man United XG, 0.49 against Nottingham Forest, 0.6 against Brighton, has scored in the last 4 game weeks, 5 attacking returns in that time. Although he's not on penalties, his underlying XG per 90 is far better than Mbermo's, who is on penalties, and he's cheaper. So Wissa, I think there's an element of just not overthinking it. He's got Ipswich, followed by 2 decent game weeks after that in Fulham and Wolves. I think for me, it's a good transfer, and no matter how you look at it. But he's not the only good forward to have. And because I'm chasing rank, I am at least considering some of the alternative forwards. So Chris Wood is one. I've spoken about him in my who to buy video. It is definitely a fixtures play because Chris Wood has not been fantastic recently, nor have Nottingham Forest. And he hasn't had an XG of over 0.26 all the way back now to game week 24 against Brighton when he obviously got that hat trick. Since then, it's been a very barren spell. He's only scored 2 league goals since that time. But those fixtures, crucially, weren't against Leicester, and he's got Leicester at home this game week, who ship goals for fun. So it is a fixtures play, but he's got 2 good fixtures now in game week 36 and 37. So I'd have no arguments whatsoever in terms of bringing him in. And then game week 38 could be a massive Champions League crunch tie to determine whether Chelsea or Nottingham Forest get into that 5th spot potentially. So he's not a bad transfer in. It's definitely a fixtures play rather than a form play. Wissa probably ticks both of those boxes. So I prefer Wissa, but if you're chasing rank like I am, then players like Chris Wood or Matheus Cunha could come into your thinking. Now, a quick word on Cunha, whose fixtures don't light up the screen. There's no big green promoted sides in there, or now newly relegated sides in there. But Brighton, Palace, Brentford, not a bad set of fixtures. And we've discussed it at length all season. Cunha's got the benefit of not just good attacking returns consistently throughout the season. He's now got 22 of them, but he also gets bonus points whenever he returns as well. So the upside is a bit higher on someone like Cunha. If he can bag even 1 attacking return, you're looking at an 8-9 pointer. If he can bag 2, you're looking at a very healthy double-digit haul. And he could bag 2 in any of those game weeks. I wouldn't put it past him. So at 7.1 million, he's a little bit more expensive than Wissa, but he's got all of those elements that Wissa's got, plus he's slightly more talismanic because Brentford have Mbermo, they've got Sharda as well that they can rely on for goals. Cunha is very much their talisman. Strand Larsen does pitch in with quite a few goals, but it all runs through Cunha. They've got good fixtures and he's got the bonus points element as well. So I do quite like him as a differential option that most people probably won't be going towards. You can look at Watkins and Evanilson as well. Evanilson, the minutes have been very good, but maybe not quite as good as the likes of Wissa. Obviously got taken off early against Man United, got taken off a little bit early against Arsenal, although I wouldn't worry too much about that. That Leicester fixture is the one you want him for in game week 38, but Villa at home and Man City away, I don't completely hate it as a little run. So again, if you want to go there early as a bit of a differential, I really don't mind it, but he will be a very popular transfer in come game week 38. Watkins as well, maybe there's an element of going early on it right now. Bournemouth away is not a fantastic fixture, but it's also not terrible. After that, Spurs and Man United. I actually think that Spurs game is arguably a very spicy captain fixture for Watkins. He is still getting taken off early, even though Rashford is out of the 11, and Marlon does come in and take minutes off of him, which is frustrating, but I would be surprised if he didn't at least start all of the games now between now and the end of the season. Those fixtures are so important to Villa. They are maybe not favourites for Champions League football at this point, but they've got an outside shot at it, and they are going to throw everything they've got at those 3 fixtures. So Watkins, I imagine, starts in each of those games, and next week in particular is going to be a very good time to be buying Watkins. You could look at bringing that forward. Now, looking at my specific transfer plans there, I think the obvious one for me would be to remove Mateta and bring in Wissa. I could look at Wood, Cunha, or Evanilson, but I just think there's an element of overthinking it. Wissa is fantastic on the data. He's in great form and a fantastic fixture against Ipswich. So I do want to double up on the Brentford attack in that one. And players like Wood and Cunha, whilst very good, Cunha in particular, I could wait for next week if I wanted to. And there might be other strikers that I like the look of by that point as well. So Wissa is the most likely one if I get no early team news. However, it's not quite as simple as that. There might be other things that come into play in terms of the Man City early team news. So I think the simple one is whether or not we hear Kevin De Bruyne starts. Now, if KDB does start, it's an easy move from Salah to KDB. That's one free transfer. I'd probably still take the hit to bring in Wissa as well. And that would give me a lot of money in the bank to play with in game week 37 and game week 38. Although it's for a hit, I think the upside is there. I think the problem is that Salah this week probably doesn't look too great, although I would argue the Arsenal fixture is probably not as bad as it looks on paper, considering they're quite likely to rotate after their Champions League tie. So I don't mind that necessarily. But I think if we hear that KDB starts against Southampton, I do quite like it. Plus, in that specific position, you can play a little bit of a game week in, week out with chasing points if you're chasing rank as well, where it could be KDB this week, followed by potentially Palmer against Man United in game week 37, followed by Saka in game week 38 when they go up against Southampton. And you could put the armband on all three of those and really chase upside going against a high-owned player like Salah as well. Obviously, there's high risk there, but there's also potentially high reward because none of those players are going to be over 100% effective ownership, for example. So I don't completely hate that. And if we get word that KDB starts, but no word on Haaland or Marmoush, then that's a combination that I quite like the look of. Another combination that currently I think works for me right now is to get rid of Sarr, who I'm reluctant to do so, but it's possible. That would give me a little bit of a hole in my budget of 2.6 million. But if I was to remove Isak rather than Mateta or Marmoush, then I could play Wissa. And again, that would give me the money to make that move and still keep Salah. Now, again, it's a hit. It would allow me to keep Salah, but not Isak. And I don't mind playing Isak in the last 2 game weeks of the season. So, I mean, we'll use Murphy here, but the fixtures are obviously the same. Chelsea, Arsenal, Everton. I think the Everton game is a pretty decent one. Arsenal might not be the worst one in the world. Even though Arsenal's data is very good, they probably will have tied up Champions League football by that point, so I don't hate it. And Chelsea also is a very important game for Newcastle and Isak, so he stays on the pitch. They're going to throw everything at it, so I don't mind it. So I would prefer not to sell Isak, even though he's not been in great form. However, that is another combination I don't mind the look of. A final transfer combination that I would like to take a quick look at is on the off chance that we hear that Haaland starts the game. Now, it is worth noting that even if we do hear that Haaland definitely starts, there's nothing to say that he doesn't come off early because he's been out for a little while now. I think it's 6 game weeks. He hasn't had any minutes in a while. So there's a good chance that even if he starts the game, he comes off at 60, 70 minutes. And then who knows whether he's even going to start the following game week against Bournemouth. And it might take a -4 to get to him and then also a -4 to get him out of your side if you hear that he doesn't start against Bournemouth. So it's a tricky one, but I do at least want to give myself the possibility of getting there and work out that combination in advance just in case it gets to the deadline and we get a leak that Haaland definitely starts and it does tempt me. So let's say that we don't hear anything about Marmoush either way. I think Haaland in for Marmoush is still probably the best play there. It does give me a massive budgetary issue of 6.1 million. So I think the solution there would have to be getting rid of Salah. Now, in my watch list on the right-hand side, I've got Elanga and Sharda for this exact purpose, because I'm going to have to look for a cheap differential midfielder with high upside in the short term if I am going to get rid of Salah for Haaland. I don't mind Elanga, but with Hudson-Odoi out, he has been playing or was playing a little bit wider in game week 35, but the fixtures are absolutely incredible. So that's worth noting. It is a fixtures play. Leicester, West Ham, Chelsea, I don't mind it. And if Hudson-Odoi is still out, then I think that is an upside player I can get on board with. Sharda is another one I don't mind. Now, the minutes aren't fantastic. He gets 60 plus per game week at the moment for quite a while. But like I said, Brentford have got strikers coming back. And I think out of that front line, if anyone's going to get rotated or brought off early, it will continue to be Kevin Sharda. So, although the fixtures are good, I think I'd be more tempted to go with Elanga at this point in time. So this would be the transfer combination for a -4 to get to Haaland, but it would, of course, mean selling Salah, which isn't ideal because I think Salah's minutes are probably going to remain very strong. And Haaland, even if we get news he starts in game week 36, there's no guarantee he starts in game week 37 or game week 38. I've reset it quickly because there is another transfer combination that is very aggressive that I don't hate the look of, and that would involve selling both Isak and Marmoush. So if we cross them both off, bring in Haaland, again, this is on the proviso that we hear that he definitely starts and I want to go ultra aggressive. So Haaland starts, we hear the news early, I bring him in. Obviously, I've got a massive budgetary problem to deal with there, but I also go aggressive, save a bit of money by bringing in Wissa for Marmoush or Isak. Obviously, they both get sold. And then I've got 3.4 to find. And to do that, I could look at completing my triple Man City by bringing in Kevin De Bruyne for selling Salah. So in this combination, it's a -8 to get rid of Isak and Salah and Marmoush. And that would bring in De Bruyne, Haaland and Wissa. This is heavily aggressive. I would not recommend it to anyone. But again, I want to give myself the option of getting a route to both De Bruyne and Haaland, and also doubling up on the Brentford game against Ipswich, because that goes ultra aggressive against the promoted sides. I'd be missing out on a second or a third Nottingham Forest player against Leicester, but it triples up on 3 of the highest upside players for Man City and doubles up on the 2 Brentford attackers I would most want. I'd have to be captaining probably Haaland or De Bruyne in this situation, because in for a penny, in for a pound, if you're taking the -8, you need to regain those points somehow and go full variance and really hit and hope. I don't think this is a move that I'm necessarily likely to play, but again, it's something that I'm just keeping in my back pocket on the off chance that we hear news that De Bruyne starts, Haaland starts, and Marmoush doesn't, which again is a pretty unlikely combination. Overall, I think it is most likely that I keep it simple and go with Wissa in for Mateta and keep my powder dry, give myself a bit of budget to play with next game week, where there are some more interesting moves that I could be looking at, and also possibly even roll the transfer next week to give myself 2 free transfers and go a little bit more aggressive in game week 38. So with all of that in mind, I think the most likely move is obviously the free transfer. However, there are -4s that I've spoken about here that I do like the combinations for, but it all depends on that early team news. And I think I'm unlikely to make those moves unless I get a proper confirmation that Kevin De Bruyne or Haaland starts. I think De Bruyne is the one that I'm more tempted by. Haaland, even if he does start, I'd still be a little bit hesitant because it's a lot of budget. It's a -4 or even a -8 to get there. And there's no guarantee that after game week 36 is out of the way, I won't want to just get rid of him straight away as well, which could leave me in a little bit of a pickle. So with that in mind, hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. Do let me know what you think of the transfer plans and what you're thinking of doing yourself. Also, let me know, at my rank, would you still be going with Wissa? Is he differential enough? Is there enough upside to be gained there? Or should I be looking possibly at Chris Wood or Cunha, possibly even Evan Nilsson as well, as that differential that might spike me a little bit of variance? As we reach the end of today's video, leave a comment below on your transfer plans and of course your thoughts on those moves as well. And if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll see you next time as we take a look at my game week 36 team selection.